Whoa, I like this meme a lot, by the way. This one's cool. Did you post this one already? I haven't even seen this one. I like this. Conscious, subconscious, unconscious. Wow, this is
Pretty
great.
cool.
Love can fool you, hate can make you blind. Affections cloud your judgments. If you make decisions when you're happy or sad, you can never be right. Listen now to my advice, the recipe for better life. Hey! Don't follow your heart, it might only let you down. Follow only reason, emotions lead to treason. Only one thing will never let you down. To believe in yourself, believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever.
Here they are. They're the princes of the universe. Bright. That's a bright boy right there.
Oh,
Look at that
what
sun
up?
on you. You look so bright. Look at that. You're like the sun.
yeah, exposed to Plato's ideas. So.
You're getting all these messages from fan philosophy students that are like, dude, Andreas, you've got the pretty philosopher voice. I was like, oh, that's maybe another name for that. It's like, good job.
Stop this.
Sorry, I'm gonna start recording. Hold on. Wait, it is recording? It's already recording? Oh, that's embarrassing. Hold on. Yeah. All right. Well, at this point, I'm gonna do like a clap thing, and so I know that. How do I? Oh my gosh! Welcome to another exciting episode of this fabulous show, which I think is Advanced Chats from Advanced Philosophy Memes. These are our guests. This is amazing. We have a couple people back, and we have a couple new people. And Aljosha's the guy actually helped me start making this chat in the first place. He started the group in the first place, Advanced Philosophy Memes, which we came out of the Philosopher Memes chat. So, Comrade Aljosha, do you want to take it away by giving us a little bit about yourself real quickly?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me again. I just have a YouTube channel where we talk, about stuff like philosophy of language and like language through a philosophical perspective and science of language and, everything like different topics like you can find whenever on my channel, like about language.
And music videos too. He actually made the song that's the intro. If you notice that, that's this guy singing, or with also Rocco, his friend.
Yeah. That's pretty rad.
It's pretty tasty, like anthem. Well, okay, so also you do a lot of schoolwork, a lot of studies, and so if you're looking for some really epic videos from like the modern philosophy, I feel like around the world, I've seen some pretty good stuff, but Yoshi's one of my favorite. And then Daniel, you're back. You wanna tell us what you've been up to a little bit, and kind of get into your education just slightly.
Yo, I think you broke up a little bit there. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're having a bit of a glitch. Is that going on?
Yeah, maybe my connection is a little bit unstable. If it continues, then I'll sort it out with my mobile data. So who am I? I used to be an architect. Now I work as a UX designer, and I have a podcast called Techno Social on YouTube, where we also talk a lot about philosophy. Go figure. And can you guys hear me?
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo, but I know what you're saying. You got a philosophy YouTube channel. Well, maybe restart your Wi-Fi or something really quickly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I can.
I'm gonna sort this out. Just keep going. Sorry, guys.
All right. And by the way, chaos and K-order are like all part of this paradigm. Eugenie from Lost in Tartar Sauce. He's a longtime student of the world and of technology, architecture, all kinds of things. And now, he's been getting deeper into the philosophy side of things with us. Do you want to give us a little background on?
Sure. I came into this whole field of kind of advanced learning, if we want to phrase it that way, about 2 years ago when I found out hashtag flat earth. It was a couple of months of waking up, and then I ran into hashtag, Tartaria mud flood and all that. And I started immediately searching hashtags. I'm a computer science major originally, never graduated. Not an expert at anything. I'm just a regular 33-year-old guy at this moment, and continuing to further research that's available online. So then after I found mud flood and fake history and mystery history or whatever, Tartaria, star forts, I was introduced to Andreas. Andreas introduced me to his Discord, and it was a wonderful journey of about 2 years of constant daily research of people from all around the world, just pretty much archiving all sorts of information, whether it's memes or, useful articles. And from there, it became this, Andreas's journey led to more memes. And here we are today. Sorry if I got sidetracked, but yeah.
No, that was
basics
great
of why I'm here.
We kind of needed all that to give like some perspective to what's going on. So basically part of the deal is like we've rejected some false learning, and we've created like a group to kind of support each other in like new learning and new studies. I think everybody here is on the same level, even if same wave, even if they think they're on, they're coming from different angles. Because, I think we all have found a lot of the lens that our perspectives and perceptions, like Aldous Huxley talks about the doors of perception, they've been altered. And that's actually not a bad thing, because we're able to see that science and empiricism is often based on a plateau of perspective that might be shifted. And so we need to use our shared lens to find out what's true, not just what's true, because, what was a lie is important. So I used to work for CNN, and so I've seen fake news from the inside. And so I spent a lot of time trying to correct fake history as well, because you go back and you're like, wait a second, etc. So come on in there and say hello if you can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Epic. Yeah, what's up? It's just your turn. Why don't you tell us who you are? Welcome, Tynan.
Oh, hey. I'm Tynan. A lot of people say Tynan. I'm Tynan.
I'll say Tynan. That's all right.
Cool. Who all else is here? Is it a lot of other people, or only see me?
There's actually several. We got Aljosa just answered himself. Daniel, Eugenie, Los Tarsos, Tynan's now, and then I think we just got Samuel and Andrew Lafuentes here too. So there's a lot of people.
Cool.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So what is your background with philosophy, and how did you find your way to advanced philosophy memes?
I guess my background. I guess that's an odd question for me. I've only really been involved, with certain philosophical topics for like the past maybe 4 years or so. I wasn't really, well known with it, growing up for the most part. But yeah, I met this cool guy a few years ago, and he was just deep into several different topics. They were actually working on their own metaphysical theory. And he introduced a lot to me, and they were super, super logical and very, deep into objectivism. Just a quick shout out, just because I guess it might be kind of fun. It was called Datalogical Metaphysical Theory. Well, I won't say any names for right now, just because we're on video and everything. But I don't know if anybody wants to check that particular theory out. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. I guess I had some of my disagreements with it, but at the time I wasn't very, deep into debate or anything. But it was something that kind of got me interested into debate, and it just, I don't know, kind of opened up my world a bit. And I guess years later, I'm just kind of like in love with philosophy at this point, and just kind of happy to, be a part of, APM and, several other groups that are just, good to learn from. Right. APM is a good, fun group.
Well, sorry to jump in. I was just going to say, it's like there's a mania about philosophia now. I've noticed it's starting to happen. But I wanted to ask also, if you guys have any problems with it or not, I'd like to kind of jump into what Aljosa was gonna, bring to the table, which was epistemology, and see if you guys if you have thoughts on epistemology. Is that a good place that we can go today? You like that?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. All All right. So Aljosha, if you're not,
yeah, I mean, now we're in a time of mania. You said about philosophy, right? It's getting prevalent, a truth, a common truth the society shared, right? Then of course there was no need to like go into questioning everything, into going into studying the methods by which we try to get some justified beliefs. But then as we have came into the post-truth era, of course, like philosophy has gained more importance to everyday life than ever before. And now that you have all of those contradicting beliefs out there and stories, narratives that are being pushed, of course, one has to kind of battle this culture schizophrenia with philosophy, I guess, try to make sense of it all. So yeah, it's true what you're saying. It is philosophy.
Before we get too deep into the workings and dialectic, we should probably use an etymology for people. So, like, epistemology is the logos of knowledge, or the study of the symbols of knowledge, right? Is that a good definition? Does that work? I think.
Thinking about knowledge in general terms. What is knowledge? How do we derive knowledge? How do we justify our beliefs? Is it even possible to know? What can we know? Where are the limits of what is possible to know, and so on. So yeah, episteme is to know, something like that in Greek.
Yeah, exactly. So you were saying something about truth is we're in a post-truth era. I think we're not necessarily. This is my theory, that because people think the truth changes all the time because they're changing. Humanity in life is the most non-constant thing. Life changes, right? So we're constantly under the impression that it's truth that's changing, when it's that you aren't the same guy. You don't like the same books you used to. You're getting older. You can't do a backflip anymore. Then you die. That Alzheimer's, that's probably more real than that truth is a lie. Am I wrong, or does truth genuinely, is it like the Tao, does truth itself change?
Yeah, depends on what we exactly mean by truth, like, and what scope we ascribe like this term. Like, do we mean like truth in some personal belief, or do we mean truth in some as a cultural consensus or agreement about how to understand the world? Because I would say that, like, in the historical eras, there was a more steady, non-changing way of how we should understand the world. The narrative was kind of, passed on with generations. But now, not only with generations, even you, as you change, you keep, jumping from one narrative to the other, and society as well. Like, what used to be truth 10 years ago, now is something that is scrutinized upon by the same, society that, like, in general would agree 10 years ago that contradicts what they agree now. So if we look at truth as something, as the narrative that the society is accepting, then it seems like that in that sense we denote that society as being a post-truth society, because of that happening, because of the narratives shifting too fast for them to really stick.
Completely agree. I think that the production of truth and its technologies have been disrupted recently. So much of this process is technogenic. It's technologically caused, whereas for a long time, the technologies of truth production in prehistory were very stable for a long time. Oral traditions led by a kingly and priestly archetype, they stayed more or less stable, and eventually led to writing, which for a long time, even though in a civilized situation, they remained stable. But yeah, recently we got mass media, and even more recently we got digital media, and what that is doing to the socially, to the notions of truth, really, is extremely disruptive. We didn't evolve for this. There's a mismatch. We didn't buy into a world where truth is always shifting, and therefore the few of us who have that shamanic trait to fuck with truth in a creative way are called forth. I don't know if I'm allowed to say those words, but are called forth in order to
I think you claimed your right.
All right. Yeah, there you go. The norms and regimes of truth in society do not allow me to say those words, but today, in an era of post-truth, I'll invent my own regimes of power whereby fuck is an acceptable word. No, but seriously, it's technogenic, it's digital. So I think the internet really is just wreaking havoc over all of this.
It's definitely messing with the social paradigms, but that's also funny because earlier I was thinking that maybe we would be talking a bit more about mass psychology. So ironically, epistemology and mass psychology seem to be like this. I mean, they're not quite the same thing, but it's sort of like gasoline and a match, right? Like, because you can't really have mass psychology without this idea of epistemology, and even false epistemology, where you impose epistemology onto a person, is epistemological experiences. So someone feels like they know something. And this is a big problem with education, because in school, you'll go to college and someone will have been there a few years longer than you. Like, let's say a teacher's teaching the same class they taught 2 years ago. So they kind of know, it's like Groundhog's Day or working at a bar and picking up women. You know exactly how to do the same thing that you've done before over and over again. And when you lose the game, you go back and play the game from the first level. So when a student comes up to you, you say, 2 + 2 = 4, right? And 4 + 4 = 8, right? Well, therefore, my ideology is true. And check out all of these, because if you trust me, then you should trust me further on. And then you start to implant epistemological values in people who haven't actually experienced these things themselves. They have no expertise, experience, or testing to say that these are true, but they found them to be morally, ethically, and logically progressive. And not just progressive in like a cultural sense, but progressive in an epistemological sense, because you feel like, well, then of course Kool-Aid is, and therefore we are, and then it's just every step of the way. And meme magic has become the new education, because if you believe in the meme, I mean, last time we're talking about people who don't even understand the memes, but they love the aesthetic. How scary is that? That could be a way that we can plant an entire new experience of eureka on people.
Yeah, sorry to cut in. Can you enable screen share?
Yeah. Sorry, let me work on that.
Yeah, that's the one thing about the name APM, Advanced Philosophy Memes, is philosophy has always been seen as one of those boring topic lectures, Plato, Aristotle, blah, blah, blah. So it's never an easy concept to grab. But then when you read Advanced Philosophy Memes, you're like, oh, look, somebody's giving me the shortcut. Let me just see what it's all about. Simple visual text, relay.
Yeah, we like to put some memes up also, but that's the funny thing. I think when Aljosa was starting the group, it was because it was a joke to make fun of people feeling like they knew something, because Socrates said, all I know is I know nothing, once he became advanced, right? So it's kind of a recursive joke. It's a self-humbling logic. By the time you're in advanced philosophy memes, if you're in there for the wrong reason, then the whole process is a humbling process to help you realize that epistemologically you've been duped by yourself and your emotional experiences. The same way someone on acid might think that they're experiencing truth, even if they're not. It could literally just be that they're experiencing a hormone that makes them feel like they're being touched on the heart by God, as they say in altered states.
I think what it also, like, one of the key things that I wanted to point out is that what this group offers and what the ability to play around with memes to me points out is that in many instances, truth is a creative endeavor, belief. Robert Anton Wilson, guerrilla ontologist, he had the idea of reality tunnels. Not to dismiss the idea that truth with a big T might not be a thing, but let's just circumvent that question for now. But truly, through the use of memes, and this is a very Deleuzian point, truth is also something one creates at every point, at every moment. Creates through our own biases, through our own language to address it, through our own nomenclature, through our own numbers. And oftentimes, like in the past meme, I don't know with science, the whole science. It's like you have to defer to priests in white, namely in academia, to actually be the purveyors of that truth that you actually believe in. So that offers like a big problem in terms of the philosophy of science and of epistemology, which is not only how do you reach truth, but the tools with which you reach truth might themselves be biased. And not to be that postmodernist guy, but there's a point there. But my answer to that is, well, create harder. So that's just my answer.
Well, Daniel, this is making some very fine points, I would say. Also found it that you mentioned like philosophy of science and language. I started out as a kind of philosophy of science, but I kind of got forced into philosophy of language after like dealing with the problem that if I want to think about the relation between theories and truth, which is the main problem that I focused on, I just had to address the fact that every scientific theory is formulated in a natural language, and then I have to return to this idea that our human specific language has characteristics that kind of try to shape the world in some logic that is not inherent to the world but inherent to the way we use the language. And so I had to go into philosophy of language, as like I had to investigate those questions. It was impossible for me to just do philosophy of science and talk about the truth or approximate truth of scientific theories if I don't truly have a theory of what the relation between language and truth is. And it would always be a creative endeavor, I would say, because you are transforming some impressions of the world into something that will correspond to what you are able to cognize or cognitize. I'm not sure which one is the right word. So yeah.
So let's give the plebeian layman example of why this is important to people in an educational and scientific way. So philosophy is built upon the backs of other philosophers. And let's give an example of a pretty famous and loved and hated philosopher, Nietzsche, right? So Nietzsche has this idea of the super duper man, like somebody who's over the top of the average. And a lot of it comes from his studies of science and what was going on in the 20th century, and the use of language comes into this as well, because they're saying, for instance, the Piltdown Man, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but this British idea that there was a human who had been the missing link of evolution that was discovered in England. And it turned out in the 70s that this was a lie. Like 100 years later, they found out that they'd put animal teeth into some sort of a monkey skull or something, and then they'd put this in England to make it look like evolution scientifically had happened in England. Why would they do this? Why would the scientists destroy the true science? Well, because the idea of an African evolution story really offended a lot of these people. And these British people at the time, they didn't like that idea. And so instead, what they ended up doing was lying and making up this narrative that humanity started out foolish, and anything that we find old, oh, well, that's insignificant, and they're basically monkeys. And at some point, we get better until eventually we invented, civilization evolved into the British man. And the British man is the perfect man, of course, and man is the perfect human. And the British white human is, if it's a male, is the top. And so we started building this idea of evolution being so that we're supposed to believe we're the evolution, and it puts a lot of people out saying that they're not part of this simultaneous thing, which we now know this is fake. We have gene flow. Neanderthals and Denisovan, if you're instance, are all back and forth. There is no apex Ubermensch. There is a simultaneous interwoven harmony of different kinds of hominids and humans that were interacting together. And so the Eurocentricity that made it possible for the Ubermensch theory kind of disappeared. And so now we have to go back, and the only thing we can do is look at language, because when you look at language, then you find, well, these are the words of the Welsh language or the Pict language in Britain when the women were stolen, and the only bits left of their language are in the kitchen because they had words that they didn't have words for. So they kept using those words in those circumstances. And we start to look at what defines excellence or extraordinary or all of these, words. We have to remove the common usage and go back and find out, like, the word weird comes from Old English to mean destiny, right? So trying to find out where are the roots of these words all of a sudden becomes important. So many people will argue, well, it doesn't matter what the root is. We have to rely on the common usage. And I argue not. I say we need to save the modern society by getting back to the radical origin of what these words meant when they first were made from human experiences.
Fair point. Fair point. Indeed, truth is a thing of this world. It is bound to the norms and the regimes of power of its own time. In 1910 in England, postulated that the British man was the peak of evolution, which is obviously absurd. And then the digital age, the thing is, like, it's not only to me, and maybe I'll address the point of going back in history to fish out the meanings. I guess Heidegger and Nietzsche were good at that, but like, in the digital age, it is not the case that there is one thread or two threads of history to dispel. For example, to dispel the narrative of white supremacy and Eurocentrism, and then the world will be okay. That's not the case. The case will be that alongside that one narrative, today, there are trillions of narratives continually being produced and generated out of infinite data points that we produce. I am my YouTube watch history. I am my bank statement. I am my grades at school. All of these billions of data points, what they end up generating. But to finish off, like very quickly, like completely in the rhizomatic chaos in Deleuze's terms. And so my argument would be less of let's try to fish out the one real root meaning of things, because I think that that's really hard, and I wouldn't be. I'm sure that you can. I'm sure that a lot of good stuff can be fished out from there, indeed, and I'd love to learn more. I'd be more towards, data anthropology. So, from the data interactions of people today in the digital world, you see that people fall into these patterns. You see that they fall into communities of 157 people, the Dunbar number. You see that they fall into these patterns of like the matriarch and the king and the shaman and the priests, and like, why? Well, maybe that's kind of a reverse engineering of these initial patterns, which may end up corroborating these insights that you fish out from deep history, such as from language.
Yeah, you both make some fine points. I mean, language in itself is something organic, right? It constantly shifts to adapt the needs and uses of people. So naturally, if we end up being in a very different the very different like environment than the people in history, right? The digital era, obviously the language is gonna have, there's gonna be some consequences in the way we use our language, and in that sense, it makes sense to go back and do a hermeneutical study of the text written before that era, because again, as environments like change, also our attention changes, and we can kind of learn to unsee aspects of the truth or the world, and we need to obviously we will see different sides, different things that can be valuable, but at the cost of some things that were known in the futures or were available to thinkers in the history, and things that are not worth to being lost. So that's why I would say like thinkers like Heidegger constantly point back to Parmenides, and before we forgot being, right? Before we have unseen the biggest question of philosophy, why is something rather than nothing? Can you believe that? For most of history, we have forgot that question, right? We have unseen it, and again, we will continue to unsee things.
I do not disagree. I find like a lot of similarities between Heidegger and the Kabbalah, insofar as, well, Heidegger was a philologist. He used to study the ancient languages and all that, and we extract these really cool meanings from there. What the Kabbalah does is you tell me, because you can probably know this better than me, but it's this way of, or even Jewish mysticism in general, it's this way of continually looking at the text and then extracting meaning and poring over those texts over time and generations and creatively extracting meaning in a way that fucking enlightens or reveals, I guess there's a Greek word for this in Heidegger, that reveals the underlying implicit meaning, the being behind the words, the being hidden by the letters. I think that Heidegger also is interesting. I see tremendous connections between both of them, because that's kind of what they're doing, isn't it? It's like having a very acute way of extracting that which is kind of hidden from behind the dead words, making them alive in the experience of each of our own hearts.
Are you guys familiar with Apollodorus? Are you familiar with Apollodorus? The like kind of the prequel to Socrates. Like it's before Socrates, there's this dude Apollodorus, and he had to flee Athens. You know, I think that's where Socrates got his idea. And Diogenes too. They're like, we got to be rebels. You know, we got to be kicked out of cities. We got to be fleeing into the night because we said some truth that like upset people. But he comes in like a lot of the Trojan War period. He's like, dude, they're messing with you. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That kind of stuff comes from Apollodorus. So what I think is interesting in looking at the old, you know, when we've talked, you know, Lost in Tartar Sauce, Eugenie's talking about Tartaria and the Tartar philosophies, like, because there's a lot of lost Slavic philosophers from, you know, Heliorca in ancient, the Cordoba Caliphate. Maimonides, you know, like is the Jewish doctor who made the law for all of the Muslim Spain. We hear words now from these periods that have been kind of turned into bad words. Like Tartaria is tarnation. What in tarnation is like a what in tarnation is such an Americanism that you would say. And there's more examples like Dane, German, Rus, Dangerous has become kind of a region. These sounds sort of like actually play onto the value of the symbol for so many people. In anthropology, they teach you about Kiki and Boba. I don't remember if we went over this last time. I think we mentioned this in another podcast, but Kiki, when you look at a shape with a bunch of points, it looks like pointy. And so they think and if it's Boba, it's because it's round. So if you had to be asked between the pointy shape and the spherical shape, spheroid shape, which one was Kiki or Boba, you'd probably be able to guess based on what we interpret. But the question is that taught to us? Is it a learned trait, or is it an intuitive thing about sounds and nature and reality itself?
Nice.
I think it has a lot to do with even no matter where you are in this realm of planet Earth, you all can tap, or you know, as a society or a tribe, you can still tap into the divine nature of, you know, understanding of why everything is. So I think the way that like languages have dispersed over time is like sort of a fractal description. Like you can create a unique description of the same thing and still get along. I guess that's kind of like how I'm trying to tie this together to practicality. Yeah. Like two different countries have the same traditions almost, but they're written in a totally different language. How did those origins begin? Did they begin because they were in the plane and they were able to tap into what we aren't able to see now? Like he was speaking about earlier, the unseen.
I vibe with that so much.
Sorry if it was all over the place.
So that might... Yeah, no, that's like this, the common point between the secret doctrine, where Blavatsky says there's a common origin for all religions, which is, you know, theosophists, they're very creative. Let's use this euphemistically. But and that's amazing, by the way, because back to my point, you need to create. That's how we move forward. But then, you know, also other like the traditionalists, right? The Dugins of this world, they say the same. They say, oh no. Civilization doesn't emerge bottom up; it descends top down. They're Platonists, and I also vibe with that. I mean, just today I was looking at this video from Jamie Wheel, who's this like hacker type dude about like biohacking and your perception, and very much Silicon Valley biohacker philosophy type guy, speaking about the invisible informational realm, the informational realm. The Buckminster Fuller call it the design dimension or something like that. So, I mean, ideas do appear fully formed in a way, and I'm very inclined to believe that, you know, maybe they already exist on their own, maybe they don't. But
man, you just took it to
so much a designer.
Sorry, you just
Yeah,
proved your point though, because when you mentioned Buckminster Fuller, I mean, okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, Buckminster Fuller invented the geodesic dome, but he didn't invent the geodesic dome. He discovered it because when I was in school of nanotechnology, someone else discovered a nanocarbon, which we now have to call the Buckminster Fullerene because it's exactly the shape of a Buckminster geodesic dome. I mean, it's a soccer ball is another way to describe it. But these shapes appear in nature. Carbon in its 6 hexagonal weave will fall into place because of electrons. So there are some things beyond just what we're demanding of reality to be called. We're not just engendering and designing reality ourselves. We definitely have an impact on it, but reality has also its current and flow.
Yeah. Like out there at the edge of the further edges of the noosphere, you could totally say that there are the subject matter of comparative religion, the things that every shaman in every place kind of fucking taps into, and that's why they have similar symbols. It does, yeah, it's there, right? It's fairly obvious to prove. And I totally think that like in 2021, in the age of tech, which just fucks everything up and the memes kind of become saturated, so the problem becomes kind of reversed. I think that our ability to curate our sense making is going to be key. And just to fucking end on this one word, which is animism. Animism, the ability to attribute meaning to things as they appear, like a little bird appears on your threshold and, oh, it makes sense to you, there's meaning. Well, there's a fine line between advanced philosophy memes and schizophrenia, which is a fucking trope in advanced philosophy memes. It's like the weird memes you don't even understand. However, this animistic, intuitive way to make sense of a new meme or of a coincidence in your daily life, it's a thin path, but it is a path of creativity, of valuation, of Nietzschean morality, of I make my own values, I attribute my own meanings. I don't take language and then deploy it as it is given to me by society. I also have the creative ability and phallus to do that.
That's a big part of empathy in epistemology. So because we're not literally, I mean, we were talking earlier last episode about how we're kind of computers, these bodies that have emotional emulation and cognitive processes. So we're a very powerful machine to process these simulations. And the meme puts through a Gestalt pattern, which is a symbol with shape and form. And as you use Chardin's word, the noosphere, there's a shared mind experience. So you could either be told, these people are terrible, they hate you, they hate you for your freedom, was a very American ideology in the early 21st century. And at the end of the day, is that wrong? South Park has shown another way of looking at it, where the kids hang out with the kids and see that the kids are very similar to the other kids. The meme, if you put yourself into the perspective, often for a second, it's a safe way for you to understand what other people are seeing and feeling and going through. And that's this crazy thing, because you can decide, do I like this feeling or this other feeling? And I can actually choose what feels more meaningful or more accurate to me. And that's, again, that theos, that shared lens.
Hell yeah. So what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the meme is like a transistor?
There's a transitional period where if I hear babies. Is this someone's baby?
My cat.
Or a cat.
Okay. I hear there's a transitional point where you see a meme and it affects you and it makes you feel a certain way. So partially the idea of having dynamic dialectic is that you're experiencing one experience which contradicts the other experience. So you have to find some sort of a balance or rationality between the two pillars of, this extreme or that extreme. And you either go so far out that you become more yourself to the point that you actually realize that you're a lot like your dynamic opposite and that they're the same, which is that horseshoe portal theory. I think it's more of a portal, like Pac-Man, but also it's that you're allowed to make, your own decisions for what is true, because you're like, well, these emotional experiences might not be real. Again, it's that false realization feeling or that synthetic realization feeling, because you might feel like, oh yeah, now I'm a communist. Oh yeah, now I'm alt-right. Oh yeah, now I'm a racist. Oh yeah, now I'm a racial critical race theorist who's pro, and you have all of these different experiences until you realize you're all of humanity and everything in between. And so you have to decide, like, are these all just excuses for us to feel realization? And are those realizations actually real, or is it just that the power you get from the hormone of realization helps you create new ideas and concepts and dreams and realities?
Interesting.
I like how he put up Terence
Being a little
McKenna
bit-
for that. Sorry, go ahead.
Totally irrelevant. What that makes me think is that if you look at the meme as an external, which is not a real thing, but like as an artifact in itself, you could almost say that it has multiple power effects. Not only the explicit, the way that it's meant to be understood, and not only maybe the dialectical opposite of that, which is horseshoe theory. Someone will love it, someone will hate it. There's probably a network of meanings that can be extracted from there that make it all more complicated. And I guess that what's interesting from what you're saying is that out of all of those meanings, we pick a few and we call that our realities. And we hallucinate. And often we kind of cohere with those hallucinations, and obviously McKenna, and they make society. But I'm interested in looking at how the meme in itself, in both the internet sense as well as in the
Well, so this
Richard
is also
Dawkins sense,
right.
how it frames how you look at it. Because one of the things about ontological design, which is this idea that I like to explore, is that the pen designs the writer. It precludes a way of being used. It's not people who have ideas. Ideas have people. So it's not the glass. I'm not drinking out of the glass and holding it. It is in making sure that I hold it in a way. I'm the mutable one. I'm the one being designed by it. Is it the same with memes? Do memes have this projective voodoo woo-woo effect on people?
I think they cross over, because obviously when the meme hits somebody, it's like a story, and the story changes slightly, right? But there's also, so last night, and this again with Gestalt, we were talking about Gestalt psychology a bit, just shape and form. And I was with my boss, and we were looking at a picture with his girlfriend, and I'm hearing another beep again.
Yeah, that was me. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. But there was a picture of a Gestalt shape that was a duck and a bird, right? Like if you look from one angle, you see it's a duck because it has the eyes and it's got the beak. The other way, the beak are the ears, and so then it's the other direction. So I see both instantaneously. But one says it's a duck, and then the other says it's a bird, and then or a bunny rabbit. Sorry,
Rabbit. Yeah, rabbit.
Yeah.
It's Wittgenstein's example, actually.
Exactly. And then I say, no, it's neither. It's a drawing. And I think that's the three levels of how to look at a meme. So it's like, this is a tool, this is a shape, this is Gestalt. But a lot of the time, people are trapped by the identity that they first experienced that epistemological realization hormone, eureka moment, we call it. Eureka, I found it, echo, there it is in Italian and Latin, like we want to find this feeling. And you're like, yeah, this is a bunny rabbit. Well, it's also a duck. It's anything you want it to. You can turn it around and make it other things because you are in charge. But so many people are trapped by their first paradigm.
Yeah, hell yeah. I am always inclined to bring in, whenever the questions that you asked are valid and solid. Like, is this a tool? Is this a drawing? Is this a rabbit? Is this a duck? And then Machiavel comes into the room and says, well, this is whatever the person who told you what it is. So if the king comes in and says, this is a rabbit, you're damn sure you're going to say it's a rabbit at school, at your bank. So there's the power element in there. The designer, the authority, the authorship. And that's also very interesting for me, because it's always this invisible layer of power latent underneath reality. Postmodernism or post-structuralism specifically has a tremendous insight, which is power relations are embedded everywhere, right? I can imagine pens that are not adequate for left-handed people, therefore placing them in a disadvantageous power relationship, right? The ones that have the thing for your fingers. And so this is the case with everything. It doesn't stop with white male-driven society. It doesn't stop with equal representation. It is ubiquitous. It is a feature of the world in itself. It is everywhere. What does one answer to this? Again, I come back to Deleuze. You create, and I don't know. That's where I stop being a philosopher so much concerned with truth and become like this mercenary concerned with attaining power. Because as a designer, at the end of the day, it's really about achieving the effects with the frameworks that you invent, within which people then go on to think, right? It's like creating an operational system, creating the words, the terms with which people will then engage in their own battles. You know, imagine the people who invented in the 19th century. I guess it was the 17th. It wasn't the French Revolution. Who invented the distinction between left wing and right wing politics?
The parliamentary building.
Fuck me,
right?
that's a powerful, right?
Well, theoretically,
yeah,
the building, yeah, the architecture.
Yeah, and look at how they framed the subsequent centuries. Again, yeah, that's magic. That's high magic. That's civilization generating magic.
It's true. We should probably change the shape. It could be a circle, like the round table. Imagine what kind of a world we'd go back to in the Camelot scenario of a round table.
Yeah.
But if you think about the tabula rasa and a priori, as Immanuel Kant, would bring up, there is a certain, and Hegel, there is a certain amount of everything that is probably Akashic record, and we don't know how much of that is because of how much that's been taught to us. This might be the value of the reset and the cancel culture, because everyone acts like it's so terrible, and I like to always find like the other side of things. I think by canceling certain amounts of hypocritical social values that had been kind of erected during the Middle Ages in Europe, that we might actually have a better chance at the youth finding their own way towards what is true. Shrek, I've made a video on at some point, because Shrek is, to mean fright. And it really is an interesting Jungian shadow character that you can represent your own being, and without this idea of the paradigm of sin and good and evil and the ways that we've been taught those words, especially, because it's not to say that they're all missing all truth, but Shrek has become a symbol of trolling and of memeing and of everything else, and the onion with layers. I think that idea of the Geist fright of Shrek, that's where we're looking at iconoclasm taking us, where people are trying to wrestle with these feelings. And we always tell children, use your words, learn Wittgenstein. I mean, I hope you're telling your children to learn Wittgenstein, but use your Hegelian dialectic to describe and express yourself, Tupac Shakur. And if we don't, then how are we going to respond? By violence, right? Because we don't use physical violence unless we have to. If we're not addressed or heard, that's usually when it comes in. If we get what we want through communication, we tend to not need to do that. So we try to teach people this kind of communication, but we might be entrapping them into using words that describe feelings that aren't exactly the way they're having them. Look at how Scientology has created a new dialectic of language with Dianetics. I mean, look at how Newspeak works. Look at how in China, you're not allowed to meme certain ways. I mean, these might control us into ways that we're not able to know.
Completely agree, man.
I dig that you have a Shrek shadow meme ready. That's trippy.
Honestly, I just found it. Like, it was one of the first things when I Googled it.
Legit.
So what about creating engineering contexts, creating self-referential, self-enclosed meaning structures like cults, like separate frames of awareness, philosophy groups on Facebook if you want. There's an interesting purpose there, because it's kind of a microcosm where all those relations of meaning making that people usually do, obviously they don't sit in a vacuum, these separate groups, they emerge out of somewhere. But in the age of the internet, in the age of technology, do they afford us the possibility to author reality, to exert power over reality in a bigger, more effective way? In
Absolutely.
fact, has there ever been any other way to affect power on reality? Probably not.
I think that the way, so for instance, using these memes, Tartaria and Xirtus, like to exert my ideology that you don't understand yet, is that idea. Yeah. Advanced philosophy memes had this APM, very ambiguous, especially to Europeans who didn't know what APM stood for yet. But because of that, it's like saying, I don't know what this means, but I'm going to know. And I'm saying, you don't necessarily know what this means, but you will know. And you should subscribe and find out. And eventually people make their own their own meanings out of that. And that's literally where the meaning comes from, because we created the meaning out of words that, for the most part, were left abandoned. Tartaria was a word a long time ago, but like not anyone knew it for so long. You can actually see the, what's it called? The NG graph on Google. It's like hugely used word, completely stops being used. And then boom, all of a sudden, you know, the last 10 years, 5 years, we start hearing its usage more. And then it there's all kinds of meanings to it. So yeah, the idea also, Manly P. Hall talks about a man and his symbols, like Jung did. He has a book called Sacred Teachings of All Ages. And so he references that the uninitiated is meant to see the symbol, but not to understand the symbol. And it's on purpose that there are multiple levels to the understanding, but only the expert creator of it will understand most of them, but never all of them, because he'll never understand all the meanings that have been created by the uninitiated. So, you know, we have to let people make their own meanings.
I want to go back on what Daniel said about forming different groups, and how that I think is very important. But it's important only if groups are willing to kind of work with each other, even if views are separate, because that's where progress, develops, is when different topics are shared between different ideologies and groups, and let's call it societies. You know, let's call us the philosophy society, and we're going to have to work with the chemistry society somehow. But it's only going to work if we're willing to work together and not be censored by, you know, places like Facebook, because that's what we want to do. In all reality, we want to guild up, you know, as a group, and communicate with other groups and kind of grow and build. And I think that's in our nature. But the last 100 years has been kind of a destruction of that, because looking at the early 1900s, there was a huge sophistication of organization and development of the educational liberal arts and sciences. And it became, I think, too destructive for those people who wanted to be in power. So that's why there is no more philanthropic society. There is no more society. There is no more Manly P. Halls, because they destructed that. And it's important to have those groups.
It's kind of weird to think about how right that is. I mean, if you think about Smithsonian, right? Smithson was basically murdered and had all of his money taken to build the Smithsonian Institute. He was killed in Italy. He was a British guy. He never stepped foot in the United States. And now the government control this, you know, multi-$100 billion, you know, industry where they can control all of the information. I mean, they had the first space museum and they have all the most ancient works, and they get to control history. I mean, history becomes very important when you start to study epistemology, because that's where the language comes from, the experiences that people have that have been recorded. And anything that's not in history becomes ancient, because we have no way to even study it. We can only imagine about it. And that's very different.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of these old, sophisticated societies of, you know, of very well-educated people was taken over by, you know, governments and such. And it's been kind of covered up to make it seem like only the government has this special sciences and all this knowledge. But in all reality, it was created by people like me and you and groups of such, where we sat down and thought about it.
I wanna bring a message of hope. Like, who shepherds? This one time I was high off my tits and I wrote it down on the wall. Who shepherds? What do I mean by this? There are attractor points outside of the willingness of men to gild up and create inner and outer circles, whereby the outer are milk for young babes and the inner are meat for the men who are able to understand the concepts. By this, I mean that it is not a deliberate choice of humans and people to gild up and pursue organizational efforts. I've failed at too many projects which relied on my own willpower. And I've learned that, you know, there's so many shit that we start that we don't finish. So I very gladly defer that energy to the attractor point, which exists independently in the noosphere. It's an egregore, it's alive, whatever it is, whatever we can map of it. We can't really, you name it, you've killed it. You can't, but it exerts its own pull, its own flow. It has its own route, and I would say that it moves of its own accord. So I would totally defer I defer to it, to the attractor points, to the magnetic things that we feel.
Baby, you gotta get back to life.
Yeah, that's some very interesting points were made, especially those this connection between language and reality, and obviously all of the influences that language takes in, such as power and society and just accidental occurrences, how that comes into play, how that disrupts or merges our conception of reality. That's some very interesting questions, and I think that goes kind of to the core of philosophy, just to try figure out, what are the limits of reasons, what are the limits of your ability to have truth laid down in some way that you are able to grasp it. We will pick up on some of those topics next time, I hope.
So glad. Yeah, man, we'll be doing some pretty crazy stuff. We'll let you know. I think Darren's got the schedule, so we'll set up. We're gonna make this, by the way, so everyone can make it on. We'll make it predictable when this happens. About to be there. But I wanted to say last point was that David Icke wrote that originally. Hold on, I need to mute Teen for a second. There was a point. Sorry, Teen, we love you, but you're welcome. There was a point when shepherds shepherded the sheep, and then eventually we figured out how to teach sheep to believe that they were wolf dogs and shepherds dogs themselves. And now the sheep who think that they're the shepherds do all the work for the shepherd, and the shepherd gets to spend all day doing what they want at the beach.
Panopticons,
right? Tina, I didn't mean to unmute to mute you if you got something to say, so I'll put you back on.
I think he's muted.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Is what it is. I love the awkward silences sometimes. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, you ready?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would love to talk about some of the dangers with deep faking information sometime. I mean, I don't know if y'all have time for this video.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I just want to hear some additional thoughts to it, because it kind of seems like it might be something that, the technology is getting better and better. You see, normal people like you kind of, taking advantage of
normal
technology as well.
Like me, ouch.
Well, I guess I don't know a lot about your background, so I guess, I just say normal people, you have all these different apps where you can add your face to different things, and not just you, but a lot of people have access to this technology now, and I guess I just want to see some of the thoughts towards that when it comes to media manipulation, different forms of it. Like I just said, if the average Joe can do it, then it kind of makes you kind of wonder, what could this do to even certain types of evidence, in a legal system. So I guess it just I'm at the park. I'm at the park right now, walking around. So
it's pretty cool though. You got a great green screen effect on your phone. I need that app. Well, I guess that works.
Yeah, I meant to take that off. I'm sorry.
No, it's legit. I like it. By the way, OP for Omni philosophy, right? Omni philosophy, right?
Right.
Yeah, guys, check it out. Well, I was kidding, of course. As much as leaving a message makes you a superstar, and we're all superstars here. The law of Yante teaches us that the Lego who actually is the most normal and normative and is able to actually follow the instructions clearest is the best Lego character. And so, we're not to think we are special. We're not to think we're as good as we are. We're not to think that we are as smart as we are. We're not to convince ourselves that we know better than we do, et cetera, for the law of Yante. But it's true that more and more people do have access to deepfake technology. And I find it to be completely, at least in my experience, the greatest thing ever. Because first off, we now know that truth can be manipulated. That's super important. So many people are used to believing what they're seeing unless they've taken enough acute schizophrenic psychedelic drugs in order to know that reality can be shiftable. And if they haven't done that, then a lot of people really believe the rhetoric of their own experiences. So, I mean, without drugs, the best thing you got is deepfake technology to help you realize that reality is a simulation. But also because of peekaboo. So I took child psychology at some point, and you learn that babies, when you play peekaboo, it's like, oh, he's gone. Like literally, I'm gone. I'll never be back. Oh, I'm exist again. It's like I stop existing and I exist again. It's fascinating to a baby, and it's also fascinating to watch a baby have that realization eventually. Like they're like, what is going on? He's like disappearing and reappearing like a genie, and then the baby's finally like, oh, even when he's gone, in 6 months, even when he's gone, he's there still. He's just there's a veil. And so that blows the baby's mind, and they'll always remember it, and it becomes part of their cognitive psychology forever. When you're deep faking yourself, a lot of people want to make deep fakes where they show, a celebrity doing something. Why not make, I don't know. That doesn't even occur to me. I want to make myself doing things, put myself on things. I could be making videos of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, but
whenever I say like danger is like, I'm not like particularly referring to you or someone specific. I'm just, I'm kind of thinking about like, I guess people with a lot more access to a lot more money, that they could have, I guess, certain capabilities over other people, to even fake things in the news. And there's even been some certain things, different characters online where they've been talking about that recently.
Right. Just Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Joe Biden being a deep fake.
Right. Yeah, his neckline and stuff. Well, there are obviously moments where it's like really easy to do this now. Like you can have, let's say your boss is sick, he needs to come into work. You put on his face and you put in the work. You can ghost attorney now. Let's say you're an attorney and you want to put your cat face on, is what the guy did by accident. He said, "Your Honor, I'm not a cat," because he couldn't get his face off on Zoom. That was wearing a cat mask, basically. So he had to proceed with a court trial as a cat, which is, I'm sure the first time that's happened in at least centuries, if not ancient Egypt. I'm sure it might have happened in France at some point, but like it was pretty rare to have a cat as your attorney. We've had donkeys and senators and horses, but anyway, with the peekaboo thing though, what ends up happening is eventually you think when you see my face on a celebrity and on another celebrity that was always me. And so it's this weird reverse peekaboo thing. So it's very powerful in order to meme yourself into the subconscious of many people, because they start to see your face in so many faces. So I think that's another thing about how media works. And it helps you, if you imagine watching movies where you took all the faces and replaced them with you and your friends.
Oh, okay.
Hey.
It's like the end of Siddhartha, where the guy dies, and in the face of a dying animal, he sees the face of everyone he's ever seen and everyone he's ever loved. One of the coolest uses that I've found for deepfakes, it's been explored by this guy called Pat Ryan, which is Blackmail Inflation. You can Google this on YouTube, find this on YouTube. It's really nice. So basically, imagine hypothetically, there's people who hold blackmail over other people, and hypothetically, these people are very wealthy, and so wealthy that in order for that blackmail not to come out, they end up dying in jail and shit like that. Now, with blackmail inflation, what happens is that the value of that leverage that they have over each other can be the value. Imagine you catch someone doing something that they shouldn't, and you have footage of that, and you tell them, yo, I own you now. You do what I tell you now. Well, all of a sudden, you can make 100,000 of those deep fakes. And what happens? The value of the original fake gets deflated, the leverage disappears, and the whole fucking system can start to come tumbling down. So that's the gist of it. As far as I understood it, I highly advise you check it out, because it's so cool. It's so cool.
You start to remove there's two things that are removed. One is shame. So a big part of blackmail culture is that they get two women one on either side of you, and there's a photo or there's this rumor, since the French royal court, and they own you for that. Or they love to get a homosexual closeted person who's ashamed of their homosexuality, and then they can control that person for decades and have them do anything. When you start to remove shame from the equation, equation. That really is a big part of our modern society. It's like, hey, you know, I don't have a family and go to church kind of guy necessarily, or even if I do, I might have sin and it's okay, because our society is a less than righteous and sinful society. It's a self-serving society. A lot of those shame mechanisms fall apart. So that's why you see worse and worse and crazier things, because both because they need something like that to catch the interest of the people, and so they make it up, but other times it's real because they literally have to find these kinds of people to be politicians and public figures, or else they won't have any control of them, right? They won't. Yeah, if you can't control someone because they don't go to Easter, then you need to control somebody who like is a Christian minister who does like child prostitutes. Like you need the weirdest possible thing that you can hold over somebody. Right. And so that becomes built into the inflation, is it takes more of something. It's not that they don't have it, they just get more of it so that it's equatable in value. But also with blackmail, if you duplicate so much, go keep going. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to very quickly, like, I'm gonna spoil the fucking video of Pat Ryan, but everyone like have a look, it's tremendous. The climax of the video is where he says that, you know, once upon a time there was a queen called Victoria. And this was around the time that photography started to emerge in her empire. And long story short, she was known for doing a lot of stuff that she wasn't supposed to. Fast forward 50 years, and you have a brand that receives a lot of money from the royal house called Victoria's Secret. So that's even like flexing the amount of leverage that you may have. Whether it's true or not, just the fucking meme of it is brilliant. And I think it should be seeded out there because it just sounds cool.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's the kind of thing that that really, like, there are double entendres in the control mechanisms so much of the time, so that everyone knows what's happening in front of them, and they're like, we can hold this over you forever. But the problem is, yeah, it does eventually wear down the value of the holdover. And so with deepfake technology, I think it's going to be interesting. More and more people are going to say, I wasn't my Twitter. Someone hacked my Twitter account. And when they type something, like, I didn't really say the thing, somebody else said it in my behalf. Or they're going to do the same thing with deepfakes. Like, that wasn't me with that hammer chasing a kid on a horse through that, that banking mansion. No, that was a digital copy. It's like Pixar. I mean, that's going to be most of our future.
Yeah. Can I ask you something? Tartaria. I know it was this 11th century kingdom. And like in Kiev and around that area, or maybe a little bit further away. Tell me about it. Why do you study it? What does it mean to you?
Well, so yeah, actually, at some point I can send you, like, I did a recent talk on the tinfoil hat with Sam Tripoli, which is pretty good. And I go through some of the interesting things about the history of it. But the deal with Tartaria for me is trying to find when they say ancient a lot of the time, and when they're looking for a modern 19th century Enlightenment, especially period 16th to 19th century lens of history, that there is this idea that society did not just start low and end up high, but during the Havelokian described Hellenistic period, Tartaria was actually kind of like what we describe in fantasy books as Atlantis, or rather that Herodotus was talking about a city-state of Tartaria. And so the idea of a non-ethnic state trade empire that was connected all over the world, linguistically, we see in Uralic languages and with Sanskrit, Indo-Aryan Sanskrit roots to a lot of the Greek words. Gesundheit. Poor lost in time. So I think he was like saying, this is it. This is the point where we get to talk about the truth. Well, okay. The thing is that Tartaria is like a jumping off point to reclaiming the original definitions of so many of these words. For instance, militia comes from a Tartar Sanskrit word meaning assembly. And you start to find out how much Sanskrit is in Russian and Greek. So many people say things started from the Greeks, but look at what was Greece. Greece is this Hellenistic empire that had a trading network with the Phoenicians from Tyre and Tar. And so when you start to look at this long time history, we have an erasure of a culture that experienced a reset. And we don't know exactly how high of a culture they were, but they certainly weren't a low culture. They had steam power, electricity, all sorts of crazy things. When we look at Cordoba in the 11th century, they had, when we say the Dark Ages, they had high powered water current electricity for lights and things, which we know because of the Arabs trading with the Cordoba Caliphate to Istanbul, which was Constantinople, that they had all of these books with all of this great technology that was lost. And so it's kind of interesting to me, basically, for a number of reasons. But when I first got excited about it, it was because there was a book in anthropology at California Institute of Integrated Studies where they said, be careful when you hear about Tartaria. And this was years ago, and no one had heard about it, and no one would hear about it again until I talked about it 10 years later. But in school, they said, be careful when you hear about it, because in the 15th century, there was an Italian who went looking for Tartaria and tried to find the vegetable sheep, and he couldn't find it. And he went to Russia, and he went to America. And by the way, California was part of Russia at that point. California was conquered by the Russians. And it's kind of a weird part of history, Alaska down to about Santa Cruz. And so there was star forts on the coast. And so they were looking through all of this empire. I mean, people don't even talk about that. They talk about the Spanish California. Yeah, Russian California. And, they found under Piotr, the son of Catherine the Great. So, I mean, seriously, not that long ago. But they found the vegetable sheep was cotton. Cotton was represented in their mind as the vegetable sheep. They didn't quite get as far down into South America and Malaysia. When they started looking where the Dutch East Indies Company had been and Formosa had been, they started finding actually walking plants that could uproot and move from place to place. There are amazing things in nature. So anthropology class says to be careful because we're going to misinterpret some historical lesson. But I say go deeper and try to find the roots of all of these things. And so for a lot of it, the lens has been Tartaria, and looking at pre-Havelockian philosophy, which has been difficult for centuries, has all become somewhat plausible now because we have this sort of collective milieu of students who are studying all around the world their own culture's roots from this point when historically, right, many cultures were, experienced this erasure over the last few centuries. And this is more difficult than ever to deal with because the Jesuits have made saints out of gods, which was, you think that's a practical thing to conquer a people. It's more than a practical thing. It's brilliant. It's a bleeding of history. You cannot find which stories are, true, false, new, old. And so that's what it really helps with our study, is to try to separate what has been supplanted in the last 400 years, because the last 400 years act so cocky. Like the last 4 centuries think that we couldn't exist without them. I mean, the world was going on quite well with quite a lot before the 16th century. And what do we have in the 16th century? Plagues, famines, wars, the fire of London, Napoleon destroying things. The metric system is all right, but it's basically the same as the Hermetic system. So we should get back to
what do you think was the theological revolution that happened 4 centuries ago? The big change, the big shift.
Well, so a big thing for me is the idea that the Jesuit church, when they were silenced, they had to change history. And so you look at the Jesuit suppression, and during the Jesuit suppression, they actually they were hiding in 2 countries, right? They were kicked out of Paraguay in Europe, but they were able to live in Catherine the Great's Belgium, and they were able to live in New York City and parts of the United States. They were kicked out of Canada. But during the United States period, when the anti-Mason party was the strongest, they ended up taking over and moving a new pope eventually through the Franciscans and the Marys, the Marists, Maristas. They had the Mary organization take over all of the Jesuit lands. They got a new pope in power. They dug up the old pope's body, put it on trial, excommunicated it, pulled the pope's soul out of heaven, and then they erased the suppression of the Jesuits from history. So that's the beginning of, I think, that period. But, there's so much that happens at that time because you have Russo Arabs. You have the Umayyad Caliphate because you're talking about Georgia and Turkestan and Tartarstan. Those are all the regions where Khazaria and the Khazar kings, which got into Portugal. And, they took over parts of Spain. And in the 15th century, they were expecting England to become Spanish, Moorish, and they have Muslim families still. I mean, the Queen of England says she's descendant from Muhammad. So all of this stuff really connects on a crazy level to the 1600s. what I don't know, I mean, this is now going beyond philosophy, but the craziest thing is the chronology of flamenco. Because if you look at Haldouin, which was the French, chronologist, they were saying basically that most of history has been made up in Istanbul and in Constantinople in the centuries past Jesus, and that some of these historical events are doubled on top of each other. For instance, events that we read to be in Europe in the 17th century happened in the 7th century. And vice versa, because of the way calendars work with J's and things. And that's a trip when you think about Islam and the Crusades, because if the Crusades happened in the 16th, 17th century, it completely, I mean, there are aspects of them that did. We look at what happened before Napoleon, and the word Ferengi in Star Trek comes from Franco and foreigner in Africa. So we have linguistic evidence to show all this. It's just that we call this period where the Arabs had all of this high culture the Dark Ages for the last 1,000 years. I mean, it's suspect at best, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So can you exist in few times? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna. You brought up a lot of critical points to think about in regards to how history could have been just totally rewritten, and just going back to Daniel's point, I think what happened from 1850 to about early 1920s with all these expositions in American history, which is a kind of a huge, the Civil War, all of a sudden from 1865 to 1900, we started building societies, we started having education systems, trains, everything was just flourishing. And I think that was inspired, all those societies that were developed about 100 years ago. I don't know about the ones like in the 1700s, because there was a lot of philosophers that came out of that era as well. But the ones in the 1900s and late 1800s, I believe was inspired by all these expositions and the inclination of man to become better. During those times and periods when they were shown all this massive technology, art from all over the world, the common man was inclined to build a better self. So that's why there was all this explosion of art and technology in the late 1800s, early 1900s, is because man was exposed to what he is capable of in these expositions.
Absolutely. It's straight meme magic. We have memes that were created in this cultural sense, and they admit this. If you look at the newspapers, they say everything from give me the newspaper headline and I will give you a war. I'll wag the dog. I will create a war out of nothing. We will make people demand that they
right?
Right. And if you go back even further, it says basically the Havelockian idea that introducing this idea that there was a plague period and there was a darkness period and there was a fall is, it just scares you into thinking we have to progress. We have to move forward. And so we have
with this so hard.
Yeah, so they installed this idea, like, look at this technology, look at these light systems. This is your future. And they implanted and supplanted and printed on people this ideology, this meme of a modern culture. Statues that were made out of plaster were put in front of people. Old statues from Italy were sent over to America and their heads changed in order to sort of design this new society and what it would be, which we then brought back and implanted in Europe. And so you look at the chain bridge where they have the lovers' chains on things and the bullet and the torn, all of the new symbolism of Europe. This is the meme magic that they're using to destroy the old world and create the new one.
Yeah, it's interesting how they did that. They used man to develop himself and then eventually just destroy whatever he built. In the early, World War I was kind of the beginning of that.
It's also important to mention that these world fairs, like the Paris World Fair, they lasted for almost a year, and then they tore down all of these tremendous buildings, monuments, and cities that they created around the world. They had them in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Panama, South America. I mean, these crazy things going on in Moscow and in St. Petersburg. We still have some of the buildings left over for zoos in places, but for the most part, they just said that they were building the city to tear down like Burning Man. Now, I mean, that's weird.
I agree that the investments behind these expositions in the early or late 1800s make absolutely no sense. Like you said, to build this massive park with buildings of grand architecture, and then all of a sudden, a year later, burn it down. You know, one thing is, wow, why would you even build it? Such spectacular, you know, amazement just to display art and science, and then a year later do it all over in another city. Like, it makes no sense.
Andreas, can people exist in two periods of time simultaneously? Like, tell me about holes in time. Let's get creative there. What does that mean? How does perception unfold through different things in time, right? How do you erase the previous civilization, put another one in place with meme magic dust?
Well, so what's funny is the original way I used to think was way more crazy, because I was thinking about like Terence McKenna and thinking that time is this, you know, time repeats itself, or it mirrors it. You know, history rhymes is the phrase. History might not repeat, but it rhymes. It's backwards. But now I'm thinking actually it's just so much easier than that, because you erase the culture while you're implanting the new culture. You conquer a people, you take their children, you put their children into orphanages in another culture that has a Cyrillic alphabet if they're using a Roman alphabet, or a Chinese alphabet if they're using a Cyrillic alphabet. You start to switch these kids over, and you put them into these new training facilities, and then that becomes the foundlings become the ideology keepers for this new era, because they get planted into positions of administration in the society. The ones that are, you know, beaten down and you know, their entire lives are, you know, forced to become Stockholm syndromed. And so, you know, it's kind of like when a record's playing and the next record starts playing before the last record ends, because if there was any silence between the two, they'd be like, DJ, no. But if you have the right kind of there's an opportune moment for the other song to start to play.
Fuck yeah. Tell me about like the relationship with time that the designers of such cultures have, and maybe what do you understand by like retrocausality, the idea that an event in the future has caused history to happen backwards, and we're just receiving its waves, and that's why it seems like some things are predestined.
I feel like you want to go like way more hardcore.
Really
I feel like you want to go way more hardcore than I usually like to go on people, but I'll do it. Let's go. Okay, so you want to think about the craziest retrocausality, I believe. I believe miso soup came from the future to save Japan. I swear I believe that. So if you look at how time space works, you know, and so this is the idea I've heard earlier, is time alive? Which was a little girl asked this the other day, and we allowed the question in the philosopher memes. I was like, this, it's not a meme, but it's genius. Let's answer this little girl and like see if she's right or what we're missing here. And that's kind of where I've been thinking about
time alive.
Time is this thing, because we think of time as, you know, Chardin talked about time being the degradation of molecules from electrons, right? On a fundamental level, it's a change between matter from one milieu noosphere to another moment. There's an architectural change from the socialization of atoms, but really it has to do with the damage of from one to the other. Damage is not necessarily what time is. I mean, we're changing, we're getting damaged, but time seems to be this constant thing. And it might not be a straight line, right? I mean, in fact, in most of our metaphysical quantum physics studies in California, University of California, Santa Cruz, we look at time like a spheroid or even a ring. So you have a drop in the flat holographic pool of space-time foam, we call it, and it causes these rings. Like you have a pond that echoes out. And if it's hitting other rings because there's other moments, and it seems like there might be holographically multiple moments happening simultaneously. In fact, I would postulate and hypothesize even that every single moment ever is happening simultaneously in a nonlinear computation. So we have Sun-Nee's law, which comes from Moore's law. And Sun-Nee's law has to do with the parallelization of processes. How many processes? You can have as many processes as you want. You have 6 billion at a time, or every life could happen. But every lifetime is, if they're all a lifetime, it takes at least one lifetime to process all of the lifetimes ever, right? You could break down all of time ever into one lifetime, but you couldn't do it in less than that, because you have to be able to at least process that one moment. So all time could be happening simultaneously, and it could easily be affecting itself. And we're looking at things like causality. All of a sudden, we look for this enzyme that, okay, in Japan, there's a nuclear blast and a bunch of people are dying and they don't know what to do. And they find these doctors aren't. these doctors are going around saving people's lives. And they're like, you guys should be way dead. No offense, but like, awesome. Like, tell us, how are you still living? And they're like, we have no idea. Like, we're in the most dangerous parts of Japan right now. But you know, like we don't have any food. All we have is some miso soup that we've been kind of living off of while we've been trying to get by. And like, maybe they're digesting themselves. It couldn't be the miso soup, could it? Of course it was. You look into the miso soup and it's a protein eating enzyme that can break the protein down into amino acids. And you know what amino acid is? It's a microelectronic memory mechanical motor system that as it spirals out, it does this origami that bends like corks and like springs in a Swiss watch. And it just goes, bing, bing, bing. That's like literally how everything works. You know, DNA is on the same levels, like explosions. People don't realize that while it's moving, it's exploding one little a nano explosion at a time to make the ATCGs. So basically, by breaking down amino acids out of proteins, it's able to also wash out and digest heavy metals and radioactive materials in general. But heavy metals tend to be the biggest problem that you get when you have metals in your blood stream and system. So if you're able to break them down with this miso enzyme, it's just miraculous. And so they're like, how is this possible? And it's like, well, apparently it arrived in Japan in the 7th century, or maybe it existed thousands of years prior, but we hadn't really developed it or understood it. It's like this thing that was needed to save Japan. Now Japan is like this gifted animist, as you put it, culture, right? Where they have put electrons into mechanical ghosts in the shell. They've really evolved into being, you know, like the transhumanism movement. It's like it requires Japan. So I believe, I think that the enzyme wasn't logical to exist in nature the way it had developed, except for the fact that we were messing with space-time with an atomic blast. And what else does that? Because an atomic blast will shift not just the matter that we're familiar with, but the hyper density of electrons will probably actually bombard multiple levels of the space-time foam, causing ripple effects. All right, I said it.
Wow.
All right.
That was good.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
If I could touch on that as well.
I have an important question.
Go ahead.
Let me just throw this one in. What future event necessitates your existence right now and your ability to mix and match space-time as we speak, Andreas? Because this effort, right, that you've just put together and of such creative, historical, you know, fucking creativity. What future event necessitates you here now doing that?
Well, okay, so, you know, the right answer is to serve God's will, you know, whatever that, the omega point must be reached, right, as Chardin put it. So to help further the excellence of evolution of spirit to the omega point is creating the worthy gift of evolution. On a more specific idea, like what do I think I'm supposed to do with my life? I mean, I think everyone's got I think it's pretentious to say that everyone has a purpose unless we have this math behind it, but it's starting to look like we have some math behind it. So I think that people have purposes maybe. And I think perhaps mine might be to help turn the reset into a reboot where we save the memories of Tartaria and of the last, 2,000 years, maybe, whatever it is, 1,000 years of culture, because I think we could probably go without losing all that into the next wake. I also think we have to make people aware of what's coming. Like this tabula rasa, is going to happen if we're not being careful about it. So that seems like a big part of it. But in terms of things I've been a part of already, I mean, it's just crazy when I look back now and I see like what I've had to do in terms of engineering, science, philosophy, and like memeing already. Like, it's like, you don't maybe know how many memes I've done that you've seen over the last few years or 10 years or something, but they've probably, you've probably seen some of them without knowing that. Like, so I don't know. I feel like, for instance, with the Tartaria thing, I feel like we pretty well warned people that a plague was coming like half a year before it did. Like, got the plague mask on and we're like, it's coming. Like 100 years ago to the day, there was a last plague. And then 100 years before that, there's last plague. History rhymes and repeats itself. So I think we're here because we're supposed to, and, in general, though, it's like, it's not a Jupiterian thing. It's not that I'm Jupiter. It's not that I'm the biggest planet. It's that I'm filled with the gas of the breath. Like, we're all dirt filled with the Holy Spirit. So I guess, like, honestly, the biggest thing is you're supposed to live and you're supposed to experience and emote, but also share and select what is the right thing. And if you feel it, then that might be your moral compass I mean, not everyone has one, but I sure feel like I do. And I think we're supposed to help loudly lead people with what we think is right, as much as possible.
Dude, you are an enzyme breaking down the noosphere in order for it to be digested into new forms in the future. And with that said, God bless America for allowing you to happen. So, because it couldn't happen anywhere else, man. You are American to the bone.
Oh my God.
I love it.
Well, I spent a lot of time in Europe too, man. I think that's the thing. I think you talking about Chardin and using the right terminology shows that America needs more of this, interaction. That's what I mean. Like Tartaria is the new, it's the past, but it's the new Xirtus culture of the worldwide culture that we're all a part of. And people are, where are you from?
I love this alternative fucking modality of reality whereby where time is not a linear thing, where they overlap and fucking mix match with each other over the wormholes of the weirdest coincidences that you explore in almost performative fashion. And it's not a matter of going and sussing out every detail for me, but the fucking just positioning it in this way, turning it around, all of a sudden they overlap. Oh my God, the Luz would be proud. Love it.
Dude, I mean, I'm glad.
Seriously, to me, I love it. I genuinely do.
That blows my mind and makes me so happy. Because also the thing is, that's how I feel about it. And I think a lot of people get lost in the paradigm, but it's really about a lens of how to look at things. And it's a freeing lens. For me, it's huge because I've been constrained by my education in what I've learned in school. I mean, listen to all these mumbo jumbo with citations. What is that? Being able to separate it and to create this free, borderless, psychologically borderless milieu of experience that we can all be a part of is so great. And I think, some people are like you're saying, who cares about the finer details yet? Because we can fill those in ourselves. Right now, we need this framework so that we can, as a tool and an instrument and a weapon, to escape from the corporate and governmental and sociological controls that have been put upon our identities and have told us we can't be anything else than it is.
Schizoanalysis and is this idea that meaning making, in order to escape a society where control is so pervasive, that meaning making has to happen through these pre-prescribed disciplinary control lines. Schizoanalysis is the idea that you can create these mad lines of flight between concepts, between yourself and the world, between time and society, and mix and match them in a way that is just radical, that is acid, that is mad. However, that ability invents the way of meaning making of the future, of the 21st century, which is not, bound to this strict meaning making modalities of the past, which, they give us computers and pancakes, so they're not that bad. But as we move to the future, they, how do I put this? We must understand that belief is malleable, that our consciousness is the prime matter that we are working with, and therefore the ability to even formulate these ideas, the ability to even postulate the existence of parallel timelines and these weird connections between all of them, completely novel territory, completely novel lines of flight to explore what being can be like. Because from what you were saying, what I was hearing was okay, so all of a sudden, what if time isn't linear? What if there's overlapping time? What if there's overlapping civilizations? What if 10 years ago, there was this mad override of society where they switched us all up and they gave us imprinted new memories in us? And what if we are the residue of that war of reality? What
if they're messing with us? Sorry to cut you, but really quickly. So the Berenstain thing, what if they're just picking up all the old copies of books and changing the words on them physically, not even with magic, just literally messing with your remembrance of history?
Can totally be the case. And in that case, my further challenge is yes and yes and go harder, because reality is my prerogative. And as such is this ability to create your own reality out of your own self, and to, it's dangerous, but it's also extremely valuable, because that's the route to literally reality design.
I think you summed it up with
I
the
don't know.
word reality design. That's what we're going for. It's a reality redesign. We're going as hard as we can. We're trying to get all the truth that we can find through all of history up to this point, herstory, exhistory, etc. But we need to get all of it we can that we find valuable, and we need to save it, and we need to understand it and be able to work with it. But at the same time, we need to not lose sight of what we've learned in our lifetimes either, because I think that we've found some really important truths here that you even say, you're saying they're rare, but like they're common in you and I, they're common in us, they're common in the we. And so we need to bring that forward to people. And I think that's partially why we're doing this. It seems like people like that.
America is the land of cults, dude. It's the land where it's possible to invent new religions, new cults. I mean,
can I make a point on that, actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the, I guess, greatest memesters of our day would be, of course, the person who wrote the Pledge of Allegiance. Edward Bellamy is his name. And this man, implanted this Pledge of Allegiance in all of the children's, of our schooling. So every day when we start school, we pledge to the allegiance. So that's meme magic within itself. And if, I don't want to get too deep for the podcast, but if you look into the way that you salute the Pledge of Allegiance originally was sort of how they did it in Germany in the 1940s.
It was like the Roman salute. Yeah. So it's quite scary how the origins of that, are hidden now, and we have no idea. But also just touching on time travel, it's interesting. Edward Bellamy also wrote a book called Looking Backwards, year 2000 to 1887. Now, why is a man in 1887 talking time travel as we are now? Are we on the path as such people, such as Edward Bellamy, that have the potential to write a future Pledge of Allegiance for our nations because we're looking at time travel? So this is just a topic, a thought that just popped up now because I've been researching early 1900 American history, and this guy popped up, and to this day, we still use the Pledge of Allegiance. It's powerful meme magic. The origins, of control are there. And why was this man writing a book about time travel? Also, did he see something? Was he able to see something?
Just to add to that, that's partially why I brought up earlier about deepfakes. It's not just, deep faking videos, but also just faking other kinds of propaganda, even through memes and whatnot. I think a lot of the public perception has changed just through having, I guess for lack of a better word, malicious, kind of content to kind of take over certain cultural mindsets in a sense, things that weren't here just a few years ago. You see large groups now starting to believe, and now we're just kind of well, where did that come from?
Lives matter.
It's true, but that's also why we're taking, you're saying it and it's a weapon, and it's but it's also a tool. That's the thing. I think that's what's so great about this is they think they've got something over on us because they've got this machine that we know how to use. It's pretty open source. It's how do you communicate with people, and how do you, impress upon people Lacanian ideology? They're so scared they have to build the neural link now because we've already figured out how to use this stuff. So I'm not too concerned, honestly. Even like you're saying, if I was in Portugal or something, I think I would do, and I've done, and I will do again, the same thing. In fact, when I visit, buddy, let's start a cult right there in your hometown. I'm sure it'll be the Church of Water and how we believe water is good for you. And then, but it just has to do with freeing your own perspective. I've found it's important to connect with people's perspectives. I've grown up very free in my own perspective. Now I'm trying to learn all of the experiences of other people more because people call it a state of privilege. Well, my privilege is actually just being from Santa Cruz and being allowed to have my own opinions. I think I was just free enough to think my own thoughts. But I know a lot of people who were exploited, abused, made fun of, bullied, etc., and that actually changes a person. And so that's another aspect that we're trying to break down. We're trying to let people share the thoughts that they wrestle with. These are conversations that you couldn't have in class because they would laugh at you or tell you to leave because they're like, this isn't about that. You're not supposed to talk about that. I have to talk about something boring that's not even related to this is a lot closer to what's important. So we allow ourselves to go there. So
and I want to thank you, Andreas,
sorry,
because you've really helped me. 2 years ago, I was a very quiet person just because of that. In school, you don't talk about those things. This is not about that. School isn't about you asking the questions that you need to ask. So thank you for allowing people such as us to come and ask questions that probably wouldn't matter anywhere else, and making them important so that we can get our benefit from ourselves and understand our importance. And it's really been a great journey, and it's opened my mind. I went from 2 years ago not being able to talk on a podcast to be able to have the confidence to just come on here and just talk, and it feels great to be liberated in such a way. And keep doing what you're doing, man. This meme magic exposure is helping people, and thank you.
Thank you, man. I would even say that I didn't make it more relevant. You did. It was always relevant. It was just that they told you to beat you down that it wasn't, when it was. It's probably relevant everywhere, and all the other people would have benefited if they had let the conversation happen, And so now we're just trying to prove that by letting it happen and showing what happens when we communicate.
Yeah, excellent, man. It's quite helpful, and especially your methodology. It's very welcoming and to all people, and it gets us going.
Well, I had thought that they were going to cut me off because of the 40-minute rule, but they've blessed our account again and just gave us a free pass to go as long as we want. So if you guys have any more closing thoughts, I think we should get this episode to the people.
I was just going to say, I do agree with you to a certain extent, I guess, when it comes to, being allowed to express yourself, freely. And, even if it is kind of, malicious content to a certain degree, you still get a certain point across. There is certain, I guess, forms of propaganda that can be good. And I mean, that's really what memes are, if you think about it. I mean, there's a lot of, good ideas that seep through, even if they're kind of questionable. But I guess, as long as you, I don't know, I guess it just really depends on the creator and everything. But, it can really go either way.
I agree. You can definitely learn oh, look, the bad guy is doing that. Well, what if I take what the bad guy is doing and use it for good? So you can still learn, either though some bad person or whatever bad idea is propagating, you can take it and reverse it and make it your own. And then just touching on your reface thing, I think it's kind of, it's of course bad thing for a person that doesn't know reface exists. They're like, oh my God, look, deep fake technology. I don't know what to believe anymore. But for the person that knows that it exists, I think it actually helps them build their mentality to actually question what they're seeing for discernment and be like, oh, okay, well, if I can reface anything, then what is real? So people kind of go back to a neutral base, and their learning begins from fresh, which is always liberating, or it's always refreshing to start from, all right, I gotta just forget everything I know, start from scratch here, clean slate. And I think that reface is kind of helping people get exposed to that in a sense, but it is very dangerous. I agree. It promotes misinformation left and right, but if it
helps people question things.
Yeah, but it does help people question.
If you go to Spain or Portugal, you go to anybody's house and you see their mailbox, and it has where the mail goes. It says right across the propaganda. And the reason is because propaganda is information. It's a kind of propagation of information. So it's been turned around a lot in America to the point that people became familiar with the word, so they were afraid of it. So now we call it public relations. You have Edward Bernays' Public Relations, who is the nephew of Freud, and he used psychoanalysis and Gestalt and every other kind of modern science to manipulate people to feel things that were irrational responses. That's not necessarily any better. So I think maybe knowing the word propaganda and using it might actually help people also more if they were aware of the word and the idea. It's like there's a Dick Price, I think. Dick Price, he's the student of Fritz Perls. He said when he started Esalen that this isn't therapy, this is practice. Therapy is a vertical medicinal relationship. Practice is a horizontal healing relationship. And so we're aware of this. It's no longer mind control. All of a sudden it's neuro-linguistic programming and we're reacting upon each other. And it's like, it's a different thing when we're all brought to the same page on a subject and a perspective and awareness. So it's also that theolememe idea, theos, we're sharing lens in this way. And so it's not just optics manipulation. And that's the biggest difference. There's a lot of propaganda is you find someone who only sees something a certain way and you figure out how to control them so they're in a tunnel vision. You can change, you can paint a tunnel into the brick wall so they run into the wall like a cartoon, and we want to help people not have that happen to them.
This is the meme I made
agree.
For that.
Through memes you can help people read more things that they would have never considered reading. It's kind of an express route into just open-mindedness.
That's a pretty based meme right there, by the way. I like that. Good job, Tynan. I'll remember your name, Tynan. It's when you read
Tynan,
something.
yeah. It's okay.
Well, Daniel, do you want to take it away with a last closing word, and then we'll get this to the people.
Could say many things. Had a great time. I believe that creativity is a fantastic thing. I think we should all be aware that reality is our own creation. And I advise everybody to buckle up and surf away insofar as they feel safe to do so.
This was such a rad conversation. I think this is probably it's one of my favorite. Every time we have one, it's my new favorite. This is great. So I love you guys, and thanks for being here. And we'll get this out. We'll have more people to see more episodes, and we'll do this again soon.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, good to go. So yeah, obviously there's a lot to talk about here. Some very nice points were made. So yeah, we're gonna pick up on some of those topics next time and talk about it, especially those this connection between language and reality, and obviously all of the influences that language takes in, such as power and society.
No one can tell you where to go. It is within you to figure it out. Using the mind and using the freedom to engage with different ideas. Listen now to my advice. The truth can often be disguised. Don't follow your heart. It might only let you down. Follow only reason. Emotions lead to treason. Only one thing will never let you down. To believe in yourself. Believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever. Listen to the voice of reason. Listen to the arguments. Listen to the voice of reason. Listen to the arguments. Listen to the voice of reason. Listen to the arguments. Listen to the voice of reason. Listen to the arguments. Don't follow your heart, oh no. It might only let you down. Follow only reason, 'cause emotions lead to treason. And believe in yourself. Believe in the reasons that you have laid out in the argument that will last forever.